Today's session is a very interesting one. I think you'll enjoy it. We're going to be informal. What we want to do is invite all of your questions. We're going to ask these great business leaders from the Omaha area to give us and share with us their insights into what makes Omaha a great place for business. And interestingly enough, as we heard yesterday, these are homegrown companies. These are companies who have developed their own businesses right here in Omaha and stayed here and used that long-term dedication to the community to make it better. And I think there's an awful lot we can learn from listening to them as to why that works for them. I'm going to introduce our panel this morning, and what we want you to know is that there are 5 Fortune 500 companies here in Omaha, as well as the largest privately owned bank in the country. And we're going to hear from all of those save one this morning. You'll note, conspicuous by their absence, is one of those Fortune 500 companies, Berkshire Hathaway. Their leader, Mr. Buffett, has assured us that he will try to join us tomorrow. As you all are probably aware, they had their big event over the weekend, and when he's done with that, at 82 years old, he gets on the plane and he goes to Chicago and to New York and to Atlanta to speak with analysts right after the show, after their big event. He'll be back in town tomorrow morning, and we're hopeful that his schedule will allow him to join us here. Without any further ado, let me introduce to you our panel today. First, representing Union Pacific Railroad is Joe Arbona. Joe? The Union Pacific Railroad is headquartered here in Omaha, and it's the largest railroad network in the United States. It has more than 45,000 employees, more than 8,000 locomotives, and runs on 31,900 route miles in 23 states west of Chicago and New Orleans. Joe directs and coordinates multi-jurisdictional system-wide policy matters involving all things with the railroad. He serves as public affairs liaison with the various departments at the railroad, working partnership opportunities across the country, and he also serves as liaison and coordinator for national business and political organizations. Joe, thank you for being here. Next is Mike Faust from the Kiewit Corporation. What began in 1884 with 2 hard-working brothers has grown into a Fortune 500 construction, mining, and engineering powerhouse with revenues of more than $11 billion and operations in the United States, Canada, and Australia. In Mike's role at Kiewit, he's engaged in civic, charitable, communications, and instructional programs for the company. He's also very involved in the business community, having served the Omaha Chamber as a member of the Executive Committee, Program Committee, and Public Policy Council. Mike, thank you for being here. Next, from Mutual of Omaha's Foundation, Christine Johnson. Mutual of Omaha was founded in 1909. It's a Fortune 500 mutual insurance and financial services company with nearly 3,500 employees just right here in the Omaha area. Mutual of Omaha is one of the top employers in the region. Christine has spent more than 20 years identifying needs in the community and connecting individuals to the resources they need to succeed and to thrive. Christine works with the CEO and other senior leaders throughout the company to facilitate Mutual of Omaha's community presence through strategic partnerships and community board involvement. Christine, thank you for being here. Next, from ConAgra Foods, Chris Kircher. Chris is a little bit in the doghouse. He went out to dinner with us last night and told his wife about halfway through the dinner, I think. But ConAgra Foods is one of North America's leading packaged food companies. They are a collector of great brands. In Chris's role as Vice President of Corporate Affairs and President of the ConAgra Foods Foundation, he leads the company's corporate responsibility and charitable giving, as well as their state and local public affairs initiatives. Chris currently serves on the executive committee of the Omaha Chamber, and I will tell you that Chris also has some roots that go into Kentucky. In his former life, he had a similar position with Philip Morris and is certainly familiar with our economies back home. Chris, thanks for being here. Finally, from First National Bank, Clark Lauritzen. First National Bank is a sixth-generation family-owned business that has become the largest privately owned bank holding company in the United States. Clark heads corporate banking, wealth management, investment services, and asset services and management for First National Bank. He serves on multiple community boards, including the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce and its executive committee. Clark Lauritzen. Thank you all for being here. This is going to be somewhat free form. What we're going to ask each of our panelists to do is spend 5 or 6 minutes each with you, explaining their corporate philosophy and culture and how they think being in Omaha and staying in Omaha has had an impact both on their companies as well as the greater Omaha area. So if you don't mind, Clark, we'll start with you and we'll go down the row. When we're done with that, we're going to open up the floor for questions from anybody here, and we'd like to keep it rolling. And I've got a few questions of my own if we find a lull. So without further ado, Clark, I'll get on my bar stool.
Thank you. Is this working?
Are we on yet?
Hello?
Do we have?
Hello?
There
Okay,
you go.
great. Well, thanks everyone for coming to Omaha this week. It's a real privilege for us to be here with such a group. I can't believe you could bring 200 people on a trip like this. I'll just give you a brief overview of our company and then speak a little bit to the question at hand. We're as Alan said, we're a sixth-generation family-owned business. We were founded 155 years ago this year. I represent the sixth generation of the business, and we're the largest privately held bank in the United States, in Nebraska and about the 7 surrounding Midwestern states. We also have a large credit card operation. We'd be the 7th largest US-based credit card issuer in the country. And Jim Frazier, for your benefit, if the American Express card ran out last night, I'd be happy to issue you a new card, provided it were guaranteed by the Lexington, Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. But in all seriousness, we love Omaha. We spend a lot of our time at the bank, at the ownership level and the employee level, giving of our time and resources to this community. One of the things you all may have noticed, I think you're staying downtown, I noticed on the postings over here that somebody made a comment about how many brass buffalo does one city need. Our company is responsible for that. And Alan told me to respond, how many brass horses does one city need in Lexington? But in all seriousness, our belief is that all great cities have great public art. If you just travel the cities of the world, there is art that the community can enjoy for free. And we have spent the better part of 10 years building a sculpture park in downtown Omaha that represents the pioneer spirit of this community, which I think still persists today. This was a frontier town founded in the 1850s, and I think a lot of that spirit still persists. I think, one of the things that makes Omaha unique from our perspective is we don't have a lot of natural resources. We don't have any oil or gold or any natural resources to mine. We don't have any mountains. We don't have any oceans. And so I think the people here tend to be very resourceful. They tend to be very innovative. And the companies that are represented up on this panel and several others that aren't, that have grown to a large size, have done so because they've had to go outside of the state of Nebraska. We have 1.8 million people in this state. 20 years ago, we had 1.8 million people So we haven't grown significantly as a state, but our companies have grown because they've had to go out and find markets and products and services that others enjoy. From our company's standpoint, we believe that very firmly that a bank is a reflection of its community. And I noticed there's a lot of bankers here. I was very impressed with the list of bankers, particularly hosting the event tonight, combining two of my favorite things, banking and good steak. But our perspective is, if a bank is a reflection of its community, anything that's good for the community is good for the bank. And so we collaborate with other banks very frequently to do what's best for Omaha. And recently, another banker moved to town, and he and I are serving on a nonprofit board together, and he made the comment, you know, the community I came from, the bankers were always fighting with one another. They were trying to keep each other off one another's not-for-profits boards. They were trying to submarine each other in any way they could. And I think just the opposite is true in Omaha. We do whatever we can at every turn to benefit the community, knowing that ultimately that will benefit the First National Bank. So that's been our company's philosophy. I think it has served us well. I think it has served Omaha well. You know, the last thing I'll say is we're a community that, as I think you've noticed, that partners with the public sector very well, and our company very much has that philosophy that we like to engage with our government officials for the benefit of the broader community. But we're also a community of relatively small government, so we only have one House in the state of Nebraska as opposed to two. They meet one year for 60 days, the next year for 90 days, so they meet very infrequently. They are only paid $12,000 a year. They haven't had a raise in 25 years. So I would say it's a state and it's a community that tends to do a lot for itself and pick itself up and drive from the citizens. And I think that's a good thing. We're very self-reliant, and as I said, that pioneer spirit that I spoke of, I think continues to exist in our company and in Omaha more broadly. So with that, I'll pass it to Chris.
Thanks, Clark. ConAgra Foods is a company that's been here since about 1919 is when we first started as a kind of a collaboration of grain mills out in western Nebraska. But for most of our life, we've been based here in Omaha. So we have a pretty rich heritage here in Omaha. A lot of people, when they hear ConAgra Foods, think of us as an agricultural company. And it's true that's where our roots are from, but the fact of the matter is we're a packaged foods company. So rather than competing with the Cargills and the ADMs of the world, we're more like the Crafts and General Mills. Most people don't recognize our company name, but they recognize our brands. So, and our brands are found in about 97% of households in the United States. So if you've ever had a Healthy Choice or Chef Boyardee or Orville Redenbacher or Hebrew National or Ready Whip, or there's about 100 different brands we have, then you've had one of our products. And that's been a challenge for us from a corporate reputation standpoint, because we don't, unlike Kraft, have any brands out there that have ConAgra on them. And so part of my job is establishing that connection between our brands and our company name. And you even see that when we look at what we do here in the community. We always try to tie those two together and make that connection for folks. We think Omaha is a great place to live and work, and it's a community unlike any I've ever been a part of before. I moved here about 10 years ago from New York City, and really didn't know what to expect, and here I am 10 years later, probably never thinking I would be here for 10 years, to be honest with you, but what happened to me is what we find happens to a lot of folks who comes to work from ConAgra Foods. Clark mentioned earlier, because of the size of the state and how the growth is fairly flat in terms of people, we do bring in a lot of folks. We've got about 3,000 employees here in the area and about 33,000 across the United States. When we bring them to Omaha, what we find is it can be a little bit of a challenge getting them here because they have certain perceptions about what Omaha is and what it isn't. But once we get them here, they don't want to leave. And I think that's something that I talk to so many different businesses. That's really what you find about Omaha. I think there's a very, very strong spirit of giving back here. And Christine and I were talking last night. We collaborate as companies on a lot of initiatives here in Omaha. And what I think more often than not, the challenge is, not how are we going to collaborate together. It's there are so many opportunities for collaboration. It's trying to navigate what are the ones we're going to take advantage of, what are the ones that are relevant to our business, and most important, what are the initiatives that are really going to be the most meaningful to the community. And you see partnership on so many different things down here. I hope your takeaway when you leave Omaha is a realization that we really do work together on a lot of community initiatives that even fall outside of the scope of our business sometimes. I think there's a real sense of the importance of giving back and supporting the communities, the community that we're based in. I will tell you for ConAgra Foods, our citizenship initiative is really based on, our platform is really comprised of 3 different components. We call it good for you, good for the community, and good for the planet. And citizenship is part of our 5-year plan, growing citizenship and becoming as strong of a corporate citizen as we can. So when we look at what we do here in Omaha, we hope that reflects the platform that we pursue company-wide. I would say being based in Omaha gives us more opportunity to be supportive than some of the other locations we're located in because we have a pretty significant presence here. But nonetheless, we really believe about supporting the communities that support us.
Well, Mutual of Omaha has been here since 1909. It was started by a young medical student, Dr. C.C. Chris. And while over the years we may have changed our services, our line of products, one thing that hasn't changed is our commitment to Omaha. We do service across the country, but we started and we are located, if you've driven by us, we're in a neighborhood. Back when our city was young, this was kind of the vibrant neighborhood, and over the years has lost a little bit of luster. Mutual has made a commitment to stay in that neighborhood, and I think it's a reflection of what we're all, and what you'll probably hear, is that these are homegrown businesses with a real commitment to the people that live here and really providing a safe and secure future for them. We just recently, and I'll just touch on a few things rather that you may have some interest. Last night I enjoyed visiting with several of you. And by the way, I think I would enjoy Lexington. It seems like very similar to Omaha. You're all very friendly, and I really enjoyed meeting you. You also have a lot of fun, which I enjoy that as well. But we had an opportunity about 10 years ago to make a decision on 15 acres of property that were adjacent to our building. And the decision was, do we sell that property and not know who moves in and what happens in that neighborhood? Or do we take this opportunity and revitalize that neighborhood? And so we did choose to revitalize that and ended up embarking on a $300 million project. It's a mixed-use urban residential development that's just truly beautiful. And we really did that so that it could strengthen the community around us. We wanted to be good neighbors. I think you'll find that we all want to be good neighbors. Omaha is just a great, rich place to find employees, to engage the public, to work on those partnerships. I think you'll find, and hopefully I'll ask some questions about that, about the partnerships that we've developed and how did we take this city from 15 years ago looking very different to today being vibrant, where our young professionals are moving back. It's a great place to live, and we'd love to share more on how that came about.
Good morning. I'm going to remember when I go to church on Sunday to sit in the front pew. This is turning into the battle of the founding dates. I don't win because we were only founded in 1884 by 2 sons of a brick manufacturer. They started out by building brick basements for a carpenter named Finlayson. Kiewit has grown through the years. We are now, as Alan said, we do last year about $11 billion worth of revenues and operate in most states in the country. We do actually have a project in Kentucky. I don't know what the name of the town is, but it's somewhere up on the river, on the Ohio River. And but of the 30,000 weekly paychecks that go out, about 1,000 are here in Omaha. And as far as philosophy of the company, we are very much driven by the fact that we are an employee-owned company. Now, it's fairly common for a construction company to be privately owned, but not the broad-based employee ownership that we have. We have about 3,000 employee stockholders of the company. Very much drives it. So if a customer has a project that we're doing for them, chances are there's one or several owners of the company on that project. The other thing I'd say is that we don't build a lot of landmarks that are recognizable. The Joslin Art Museum is one of the exceptions. We did build that. It was completed in 1931 for the grand sum of $3 million back then. Don't know what it costs today. Like I said, another exception is the First National Tower, the tallest tower in Omaha. Thank you, Clark.
Thank you.
But most of what we build is basic infrastructure. About a third of our business is in the transportation business, building highways, mass transit. Yes, we build subways and light rail, or for that matter, the wastewater treatment systems that every city has, and the power plants that, and we did not build this building here, we did build the addition. But we are all over. As far as what we bring to Omaha, I would say number one would be leadership. We're in a lot of places. This is our hometown. We love being here. Going back to the days of Peter Kiewit, and that's actually the second Peter Kiewit, the son, he was very much a leader in kick-starting the rejuvenation of downtown just before he died. And there is a Peter Kiewit Conference Center there named in his honor. His successors have likewise been leaders and the senior managers of our company. But we have, right now, I took a count just the other day, somewhere between 40 and 50 of our employees who serve on the board of nonprofits here in Omaha. The other thing we bring to Omaha is the fact that we're so much not in Omaha, because we are this is the location of our in-house university, Kiewit University. And so people from all over the United States and Canada and Australia are coming here for their training. We do have the most comprehensive training program in the industry. And last year we did about 15,000 training days here in Omaha. So on any given night, and the Hilton does have the prime contract for our sleeping rooms, a given night, on average, there's about 50 Kiewit employees booking a room here at this hotel. So by virtue of having the headquarters here in Omaha and the Kiewit University here, because a lot of the instructors are our senior managers, including myself. I can always tell when there's Canadians in my class because they ask a lot of questions. But that economic impact is obviously major there. With that,
thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And I wanted to thank Alan, too, for everything that he's done for the greater Omaha area and to baseball. As Union Pacific Railroad was at one point part owner of the then Omaha Royals and now the Omaha Storm Chasers. And at one point happened to be the Golden Spikes, which we're very proud about. Because obviously Omaha is just a great town, and really appreciate you all coming here to let us talk to you about our history and our relationship with Omaha and other companies. I was also going to give you a little bit of history, so I apologize if some of you are not interested in hearing too much about this. But the thing to keep in mind is that Union Pacific is a company that just actually celebrated a 150-year history this past year. And we've been calling Omaha home for those 150 years. In fact, how many people can say that the company was actually founded by none other than President Abraham Lincoln, who It's pretty amazing. Back in 1861, he actually signed the Pacific Railroad Act, and as a result of this, Union Pacific was born. And so as a result of this, we were able to be founded here and actually start the Transcontinental Railroad, which helped unify our country. And actually, during one of his visits before he was president, Lincoln was actually meeting with a gentleman named Granville Dodge, who, interestingly enough, you'll probably see Dodge all over the city. If you've driven by any neighborhoods, you'll see it on realty signs and houses, and you'll see a street here, major street named Dodge. And he was actually a person who was key in the creation of Union Pacific Railroad. He was our first chief engineer. If you know anything about the railroad business, he's basically the guy who started building it and setting up all our track network. And Mr. Dodge actually convinced this attorney who was visiting that the Transcontinental Railroad should begin in the Omaha Council Bluffs area. In fact, when Lincoln became president, he actually signed an executive order saying, I want the eastern terminus of that Transcontinental Railroad to be actually a few blocks away from here. You could probably even see it from one of the windows here in the hotel. So with that, Union Pacific began its history. We merged with several railroads over the 150 years. Fast forward it, we are a Fortune 500 company, obviously, and we have about 45,000 employees who do something like 9 million shipments a year. We're a $21 billion company and do a great deal of business around the world. In fact, we touch just about every place except Antarctica. So a terrific company with great history. And we are very happy to call Omaha home. We've been here obviously from the beginning. And about 4,500 of our employees are actually based here in Omaha. We have those 4,500 employees have $1 billion payroll. So you can see that that impact, those salaries do trickle down into the Omaha economy and do make a great impact, from anything of gassing up our cars every day, going to the movies, to restaurants, and we love it here. I mean, I personally came here about 5 years ago, and I've lived in South America and Southern California, Texas, and other states, and I have to tell you that we were very pleasantly surprised about Omaha, and I second your comments about what a great place this is. I think our employees who come from all over the country really are happy here. They find that people here in Omaha have a great work ethic, and I think that does come back from the roots of all the hard work that pioneers had to do here. And quite frankly, in the many places I've worked, I've just never met such a wonderful, kind bunch of people who are also, as you all mentioned, very generous with their time, treasure, and talent. I mean, folks who serve on boards, who give their money and work so hard to make this place wonderful. And I can't think of any other place I'd rather call home. And so, again, Union Pacific, with our history here, we have a lot to talk about. We've got a lot of things to offer the community, and we help the chamber whenever they have visitors come in. We actually invite them to our headquarters to tour it, to answer questions. We also have like young professional groups that actually participate in job fairs and things like that are set up by the chamber. So there's a lot of give and take in our relationship here in Omaha. But also, I'd like to point out that it's also the state of Nebraska that through a lot of its efforts through things like tax incentives have helped to keep companies like Union Pacific in the state and in Omaha, and also help coax companies to come here, and those companies that are investing and are willing to hire people. And so with that, I look forward to your questions, and thank you again for coming here.
Thank you all. You'll note that there are microphones on stands set up in each aisle. I'll now invite anyone to step forward and ask a question. No questions? Well, it's been a wonderful session. Thank you all for coming. Tip your waitresses on the way out. If you don't mind, let me ask you a question to get it rolling, and you can answer however or whomever wants to do so. What do you think that it is about Omaha specifically that attracts and keeps these major companies? And it's probably important to note that while we're well represented with our Fortune 500 companies and First National Bank. Omaha is home to so many other recognizable large employer companies. Werner Enterprises, one of the largest trucking companies in the world, is located here. You all know about Omaha Steaks. Swanson was here. The Reuben sandwich, by the way, was invented right here in Omaha. But what do you think it is about Omaha as a community that makes it so good to work as a large corporation? Anyone?
Alan, if I could, I'd say that, for all of us, you start out with the fact that we were born here. All right, and the question, of course, is why did you stay?
Right.
And as you grow larger, and in fact, our company over the past 10 years, we've actually tripled in size. In 2005, our revenues were only about $3.5 billion. So we've had tremendous growth across North America, but also here in Omaha with the workforce here. And aside from just the momentum of being here, I would say that Omaha just has a good feel to it. It feels like home. You have the cost of living is modest, the cost of housing is modest, so people can afford to come here when you transfer them there. Sometimes, as somebody in the panel says, they have a question mark, at Omaha, but again, when they get here, they don't want to leave. They also cite the fact that, it's a great place to raise a family, and that's true. The question then becomes, of course, what about the 20-somethings that you're recruiting here? And but there are things to do for a small town. It's a great concert town. Now we're going to have Big East basketball in the arena across the street. And
Still lower level basketball, but Big East it is. When you're ready to step up to the big boys,
And Alan, as you know from being here so often, the town's gotten bigger, so this is always called the 20-minute city. You get from one side of town to the other in 20 minutes, because it does have a good transportation infrastructure. Now, with the growth, maybe that's 25 minutes, I'm not sure, but there are a lot of positive attributes. I'll close on one thing, is that for a company our size, because we are in so many places, in any major city that you can name across the country, we have some major operations. Why aren't we in a Dallas or a Chicago where you have a big airport? Because our people travel from Omaha to a lot of those places. Well, one reason is that we have a great airport for getting in and out, and it is just a few minutes away from our headquarters. And it's kind of rare for a city our size to have an airport so close to the central business district. Another reason is that our projects, we go to where our customers need something. We don't decide to have an office in Louisville or an office in Nashville. We do have an office in Nashville. We go to where the work is. If a customer wants to build a power plant there, that's where we go. So a lot of our projects are in out-of-the-way places, including very out-of-the-way places in Canada. So we have to have some corporate jets, and it's also a very easy airport to get in and out of in that regard. So bottom line, it's our hometown. We love Omaha.
I would also say that there's a very good work ethic here, and we find that the employees we get from locally are really committed, dependable, smart, capable. But to kind of what Mike was saying about the livability of Omaha and the things it has to offer, I think that's really the result of sort of the spirit of giving back that there is in the community. You find the businesses here get together and work toward making this city better. So they do things like build the Performing Arts Center, contribute to the zoo to make it better, support the arts, support the baseball teams, build ballparks, bring things like the Olympic swim trials here. There's just a lot of collaboration when it comes to doing things and making the city a more livable and better place to live that I think kind of kind of are the result of that kind of collaboration. And you don't see that too many other places, I don't think. I mean, you know, we've got, what, 2 teaching hospitals. We've got great choices as far as education, whether you want to go public, private, or parochial. It's a town that, for its size, has a lot more to do than you would expect a town like this to have. And I think that's really made possible by the fact that, you know, the businesses here look for opportunities to really give back to the community.
And I would probably add to that, and how do you take that away and go home and implement some of those things? You know, if you had to look at an average, most of the companies would do 0.5% to 1% of their profits before taxes. That's the amount that they're going to invest charitably. And sometimes it's significantly more than that. So you think about the profits that are being made, that's a pretty significant amount. There are a lot of families that worked in all of these businesses that profited and are now giving back. So we do have a lot of wealth that stayed in town that does give back. So they'll not only give to what I would call civic projects that Chris mentioned, but they're going to do your mission giving. So strengthen those social services, help alleviate poverty. So it's really, it's a great mix. It's possible in your community, but I think there's a mind shift in saying, you know, we do need to consciously say we're going to provide this percent and then do it. So I think that, you know, somebody has to get it started, and then there's some peer pressure that happens, and collaborations also are about, you know, if I do this, you do this, and if you do this, there's a lot of scratching each other's back, but it's all for the good of the community.
I was going to add too that Omaha sometimes is criticized for not being diverse enough, and I think that's changing. For example, at Union Pacific, we have a great deal of our employee population that's retiring, baby boomer generation. And as a result of that, we're bringing new employees. In fact, I think on the last number I saw, about 40% of our employees are here in Omaha are under 40. So it's bringing in folks from all over the country. It's helping us create opportunities for people also around the world. I mean, we have folks from different parts of the world who are represented in our employee base. And what's actually interesting is we've been able to create some affinity groups that our employees actually get started and we support that help welcome employees who maybe are not familiar with Omaha, don't know exactly where to go to shop for certain types of food. Being a Latino myself, when you arrive in Omaha, as well, where can I get like fried plantain or something like that? And the Latino Employee Network helps folks transition into Omaha and getting to know all those wonderful places that are, quite frankly, here. We just need somebody to point us in the right direction. And so that level of diversity is changing in the city, I think, as we grow. And it's making it more and more attractive for people. And I think the statements, in fact, that we've heard from some of the young professionals who we recruited to our company are really getting very positive. One of the things that I heard that I thought was really neat is that Omaha is actually a very easy place to navigate when you're jogging or riding a bike. And for young folks, I mean, they love this. They love having that kind of ability to do those things. And so Omaha is really coming a long way, and I think it's noticeable when you walk around in sunny days when people are out and about doing great things. And it is a great place to live, work, raise a family, and have fun.
Thank you all. Councilman Kaye.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you all for being here. I've got, even though there's a long line in back of me, if I can, I've got 2 questions. I'll give you the first one. And that is, I was downtown last night, not downtown, I was in the Old Market District for dinner, and impressed with what's happening down there. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of how that revitalization began, how the city, how the philanthropic community, how the business community collaborate? You've talked a lot about collaboration. I presume that didn't happen by accident, the Old Market section. So can you talk a little bit about
you know,
how
there's
that started,
some Omahans here who can probably add to what I'm going to say, but I can tell you that one trigger for the development of that area was when we built our campus down in that area. We were located in a high-rise building here in town before and decided to build our campus, which I don't know if you had the opportunity to see it, but it's on the corner of 10th and Harney, kind of near the start of the old market. And we developed an area that was called Jobbers Canyon. It had a lot, it was kind of a warehouse district that had become sort of dilapidated. We worked with the state to get some tax incentives, but ultimately, I think the development of our campus helped trigger, it put a stake in the ground. And I think what you've seen, I was sitting here thinking about this, I think with the exception of Kiewit, and I'm not sure when your headquarters were built, we've all, 61, yeah, we've all got relatively new headquarters. We were built in the 80s.
30s.
Well, that's right, I'm sorry, Mutual, that's right. But you've got
But we had
Midtown
additions.
Crossing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And UP's got a new building, First National's got a new building. If you look at Gallup University, that's their kind of their world training facility. It's down on the river. I think putting a stake in the ground like that is sometimes what it takes to kind of get the ball rolling in terms of development.
Yeah, I can add to that. You said you've only been here 10 years. I've been here since 1974. For a lot of things, sometimes it's someone's vision. What Chris talked about is where it really went upscale. But it was the Mercer family, Sam Mercer, years ago, that bought up a bunch of those buildings that nobody wanted. And he wanted to preserve them. And so you have that core old market area. And back in the day, it was a bunch of say alternative, head shops, selling you incense, and there's a record shop. There was Homer's Records, and then of course across the street there was Jethro's Records. And but it was kind of downscale back then. And with the rebirth of downtown, the advent of the ConAgra campus that Chris mentioned, all of a sudden you end up with nice restaurants, nice shops. It becomes a tourist attraction. But it did start with the vision of the Mercer family to save those buildings.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would just add two things. The Mercers did two things with the old market that were unique. Number one, they charged rent that was a percentage of the tenant's revenue. So they wanted to make it very easy for those tenants to survive in good or bad times. The second thing is, and you'll notice, they accept no national tenants. So there's no Starbucks, there's no TGI Fridays. It's all locally based companies, and that preserves, I think, the feel and the nature of the old market. So that sort of benevolent development ownership really benefits downtown. The other thing I'd add, and our company believes this strongly, you're never really done investing in a downtown. So you can't ever say, well, we've put $1 billion in the last 10 years, that does it. Because people in any community are always moving to the suburbs, and as are companies. And so we made the decision 15 years ago to start construction on the First National Tower downtown, which was completed 10 years ago. And we made a very conscious decision between locating in West Omaha, which would have been much cheaper, and downtown. And half the reason we did it was for the benefit of our company, and the other half really was for the benefit of the community, with the full knowledge that it could help serve as a catalyst to spur more development downtown. And it's actually the 5th headquarters building that we've built in downtown Omaha. So we very much feel like you have to constantly reinvest just to keep it going.
Okay, if I can, a second question. And this one may be one that nobody wants to answer, but I want to ask it anyway. We heard from your mayor yesterday, who talked about the 3 tax increases that he convinced, I guess, your city and your council to adopt a couple of years ago. I'm curious about your, and more generally the business community, maybe the philanthropic community, your response to that tax increase, whether you think it was a good idea or a bad idea, as it had a positive or a negative impact on economic development in this community.
Well, as the mayor said, we'll know on Tuesday, I guess. Anybody want to tackle that?
No?
Well, we're all voting on Tuesday, but, but it's a secret ballot.
Well, I guess Steve's question is one that every community grapples with, is how do you fund the services that you need? You can't always depend upon the generosity and largesse of great corporate citizens as well as private individuals. How does that balance work here in Omaha? In your view, did it help? Was it a good idea? Obviously, we'll know what the public thinks on Tuesday, but your impressions of that.
Well, I was going to start just with Union Pacific. I mean, obviously, anything that affects our employees affects us. And I mean, I think people feel property taxes are a little high here in Omaha, and so it does. Since we have employees from all over the country, I mean, that does affect people's consideration in coming here. But you know, there are services that need to be fulfilled, and you know, we recognize that, and you know, we're part of the process, and we like to you know, weigh in and give our opinion. But at the end of the day, it is democracy. We want to see people vote and say their will. So.
Yeah, I'd say it's a constant battle. Of course, there's always a tension between the services that the public want and the taxes that they want to pay. We have, you know, what it's classified as relatively high property taxes here, but we also have pretty good schools. And I think that the people in Omaha, they want, I mean, we complain just like you do about your taxes, but at the end of the day, a lot of people want a high quality of services. I actually did transfer somebody in from Nashville a number of years ago, and came to my office. He says, "Oh my God, Mike, you can put your kids in the public schools here." I said, "Yes, you can." And they want those level of services. We also have a disadvantage as compared to our neighbor Wyoming. They can ship their taxes out on a Union Pacific rail car via the taxes on that coal. And we have to fund our own services here. So it is always a challenge, and you always have to be talking to your public officials to try and get the most bang for the buck, if you will, to make sure that you know, squeeze those nickels till the buffalo squeals, and get the most value for our tax dollars.
Yeah, I would just add that our state constitution mandates that we balance our budget every year and that we hold a cash reserve. So the state of Nebraska has no debt, and our tax is a little bit higher than probably all of us would like. I think that's true. On the other hand, we recognize the trade-offs and the benefits relative to a lot of states that are in great fiscal disarray right now.
And the composition of the state is a little different than some states, because you've got such a high population here in the Omaha-Lincoln region and such a low population everywhere else. So what you find is the taxes tend to be a little bit disproportionate to those living in the more populated areas than the rural areas. But I would say this too, that this is a conversation that has been occurring a lot in Nebraska recently. Our governor is really taking a close look at how we can improve the tax climate. And I know that many of us sitting up here have been engaged in conversations about, you know, what can we do to improve the tax climate working together. So, you know, it's something that we're all participating in and looking at.
Thank you for taking a crack at it. Thank you, Alan.
You bet. Brother Riggs?
Good morning, and thank you all for your insights about your community. Mr. Faust, you mentioned affordable housing, and you talk about growing your companies within the community and bringing people into the city and bring them here. So my question is, does your city have a zoning planning commission that manages growth, or do you plan for growth with infrastructure installations so that the developers will go there, or do you let the developers build something and then figure out how to connect it?
Well, I may turn this over to Clark, because we're some unique, I believe, Clark, in terms of the way we use SIDs, sanitary improvement districts. Number one, I'd say that we have an advantage here in Omaha. We have an extremely liberal annexation law. We can annex any city adjacent to us, provided they haven't reached 10,000 people. And we just annexed this city of Elkhorn a bit ago. They were getting up to about 9,000 or so. And so we don't become a donut city here, like a St. Louis. That is, I think that's been a godsend for our city. On the outskirts of the city, where you have the new housing developments, we have what we call sanitary improvement districts. And geez, Clark, maybe you can pick that up. I'm not really familiar with them.
Yeah. SIDs, and I don't know if you have the equivalent in Kentucky, but essentially allows the developer to create a quasi-public entity that can then issue public debt to finance the early stages of the project in the form of warrants until such that the tax base gets high enough that they can then take those out with longer-term bonds. We're the largest underwriter of SID warrants and bonds in the state of Nebraska, which is primarily in Omaha and Douglas County. And then, as Mike said, the nice thing about that model is once the SID then gets built out to a reasonable extent, it then becomes economical for the city to annex it. Effectively, it's off-balance sheet financing for the city to grow, because during that period, the city doesn't have to pay the full freight of those goods and services for that community until it makes sense for the city to do so. So it's been a good model, and I think it's allowed us to grow, but not grow too quickly, because ultimately the numbers have to work for those SIDs to work.
And Clark, to directly address this question, I believe back to the planning part of this question, doesn't the city of Omaha or planning department have planning authority so many miles outside city limits?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Senator?
First, good morning. I appreciate you all coming to the panel and being open to our questions. Kentucky, just like you all, we're looking at tax modernization. I noticed you all decided to address it with a study through a resolution, which is a little bit different than a Commonwealth. But what I'm curious about is that we all know we have to have taxes, but we've seen that there are a lot more, I guess, intelligent or smarter taxes out there that a lot of states are participating in. We've reached a climate across states to where now we are going after other states' businesses. We've seen California put itself in such a state that Texas and a lot of other states are actually economically developing, recruiting from these other states because the environment for their businesses is so bad. My question to you is, as you all get into your tax modernization, will you all as business people have a role in that? Is there a part of this where you'll be sitting down, you'll be brought to the governor's office or your economic development coordinator and you'll sit down and participate in that? Is that one of the ways you all handle that?
Yeah, and we have a very strong, the Omaha Chamber is very strong on issues like this. The Nebraska Chamber is pretty strong. Lincoln, you know, we've had conversations about this. I think that the attempts to make changes in the past year were maybe a little more aggressive than most folks had a comfort level with. But nonetheless, the dialogue started, and I think, you know, I think of most of the businesses being represented on the chamber continuing the discussion right now. And typically that's, you know, that's been the organization that's done a lot of work on this and that I think we continue to support and view as a good way to address that issue.
I would second that. We applaud what the Omaha Chamber of Commerce has done, David Brown and them, just an excellent job in taking in our comments and voice out our concerns and our wishes. So we appreciate that.
Well, I'm just curious because my other question to you all is I notice you're homegrown companies. You all are from here. Obviously, your kids are here and you have a lot of investment in the state. Is there a tax package or a structure or an environment that another state create, say Kentucky, that we could do something that would be so attractive that you would actually look at leaving Nebraska? And I say this blanket wide either way, whether it's going from here to California, but this is where we're moving to. You're actually seeing more of us not so much going after the internationals or startups, but states are now competing for other companies that are they're staples in states, and they're going from the gun industry to a lot of others that are recruiting them to states that they feel are more lucrative or more, you know, and aligned with their thinking. But is there a scenario out there where a state could do something? I mean, obviously Tennessee, you brought the fellow in from Nashville. I'd say as soon as he started paying his income tax, that probably made a little bit of a difference in what he was taking home.
I'm reminded, I believe it was Will Rogers that said that he was proud to be able to pay taxes, but he could be just as proud for about half the price. But you have a good question there, and we're probably a good case study because our company literally could be anywhere. All we need is a box, a building, and put in people. We don't have manufacturing plants. As I said, we go to where our customers need something built. And maybe Chris can add to this, but a number of years ago, we recognized exactly that point, to your point, that we had a lot of companies in this city that could be anywhere. And we made a strategic decision, I believe it was the late 70s, that at the legislature, that we wanted to retain our homegrown companies, because we had just lost Northern Natural Gas,
Exactly right.
which had later became Enron. And of course, we say here that it would have never become Enron if they had stayed here. But we looked at what are the characteristics of corporate headquarters. Why do you want corporate headquarters? Well, it's because policymakers can go to the corner office rather than the headquarters off in XYZ city, and that helps you make things happen for your hometown. The characteristics of a headquarters is that, number one, you have some senior executives, and more highly compensated people. You have people that have stock in their own company. We put together something called LB 775 to encourage it. It was quite controversial at the time, and actually it was ConAgra causing all the controversy. But one of the things that has there is that, like, I'm a stockholder in my company. When I sell, there's no capital gains on my stock here in Nebraska. Okay, and there's also incentives for the companies to grow in Nebraska. Now, they're earned credits. You have to actually perform to get the tax credits. We don't give things away like other states. You have to earn it. I'm not as familiar with it, LB 75 provisions, but it's basically to encourage companies to grow in this state.
And is that based on, like, we have CRETA and stuff, is that based upon the amount of employees? Do you hit certain thresholds and then you qualify? Okay. And a lot of that stuff
for employment and investment.
Right.
Yeah. And you'll see those are standard throughout a lot of the states out there. Some of the states have waited, of course, Kentucky did this a couple of years ago. We waded into the tax modernization through piecemeal. And we were looking at how do we protect companies that are domiciled in Kentucky and give them, certainly not a disadvantage for somebody that's doing business in Kentucky, yet they're not domiciled there. But we saw the AMCs. I don't know if you all remember these, but Kentucky got so creative that we had the alternative minimum calculation, and we had the alternative minimum calculation, and then we had the alternative minimum calculation. So I think two negatives makes a positive, but it shows you how crazy that it got when we didn't sit down and bring businesses to the table. And that's why I was curious. I was sort of following how you all, the gridlock you had last session and how you all broke out of that through a resolution. And I was looking at who they appointed to try to come up with the answers. And I didn't see a lot of businesses on that panel that's going to be coming up with your all's tax suggestions.
Chris and I spent a fair amount of time on this, and just to put it in perspective, when our governor took office, the Tax Foundation ranked Nebraska 45th out of 50 states in terms of tax climate. Today we're ranked 31st. So we've made strides, but we would like to make further strides. And so the governor had a really concerted effort in this legislative session to reduce corporate and individual income taxes, and those are the big ones. And that would have dramatically improved our ranking, and for a variety of, I would say, tactical reasons, that effort was not fruitful. But the one thing I learned from that, and it would be my advice to any state or community trying this, is anytime that you try to streamline taxes or lower taxes, there are national organizations that sort of parachute into your community, and they are well-funded and well-organized and are very savvy in the media. And so we will make an effort again, I think, to help improve our tax code, but I think the next time around our tactics will be more studied, more informed, and we need to manage the message better to get it through the legislature.
I think, Senator, we've just got a few minutes left, but I do think that one of the takeaways here that you can take back to Frankfurt perhaps is the concept of investing at the government level back in the companies that are already there. All of us who are already participating and growing our own tax bases is as acceptable as, or better, than going out and trying to recruit others with some of the incentive tools that you might have.
Very good, thank you.
Thanks. Just a little editorial comment there. Anybody disagree with that? I didn't think so.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, what role do you guys as the business leaders in Omaha help with bringing entrepreneurial or the startups, the emerging, bringing little companies into that growth potential from that standpoint?
I didn't quite hear the question.
No, entrepreneurial. How do you guys reach out and help those entrepreneurial companies, those startups, those emerging little companies come into Omaha?
Well, I think Omaha is a very inclusive and welcoming community generally. And I think, did you all go to the Mastercraft building yesterday? You know, there are 32 startup companies in the Mastercraft building just 5 blocks from here. And our company actually is a tenant in that building as well. And one thing that we're doing, we've partnered with a law firm and an accounting firm to help teach startup companies how to be bankable, how to draft a contract, how to get an audit. And I think one of the things we've learned is a startup company is very much like a newborn child. It needs tremendous support and encouragement and resources and mentoring. Otherwise, it will die. And so Omaha, I think, has done a much better job in the last several years of recognizing that and bringing all the resources to bear for those entrepreneurial companies. We're going to do a lot more in the next few years, and there are a lot of plans underway to do so. But it really takes a community-wide effort, just the same way it does to address poverty or to address the arts or other things. You've got to really focus on it, and I think we're starting to see that.
Yeah, if you look at, we've got, the Chamber does economic development here in Omaha, and there's a 5-year plan called Prosper Omaha right now that we're actually raising money for, and all of the companies you see here are heavily invested in this plan, and that entrepreneurial need there is a strategic plank of the Chamber's plan for economic development, and we're all pretty heavily invested in that. So,
and that effort is for $23 million, right?
That's right, yeah. And it's a over 5-year period of time. And it's a renewal of an economic development effort that began, what, 15 years ago? I think?
20.
Maybe 20. And it's just amazing how much support the business community provides, both in terms of financial and other resources. But that's a strategic plank that the Chamber has, and I think in that way we also, that's another way we support it.
I think part of the way we help is by being a customer to those businesses. We do a tremendous amount of business with minority, women-owned, what you call emerging businesses, and throughout the country. And how can you help? I guess by being a great customer to those businesses.
I was going to say at Union Pacific, we in some ways sometimes actually develop businesses spin-offs from our company. I mean, interestingly enough, we had a very young person who started our company who came up with a great idea that our technology department took and ran with it, and they're going to go offer it to other companies. I mean, so you know, we do have that entrepreneurial spirit also, and we welcome working with companies like that too. They can be very creative and help our business become more effective.
I think we have time for one more question. Councilman Clark.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask about the place of the arts in Omaha, music, theater, and art in museums and public art, and the status of the arts, and then how are the arts supported? If you could answer that, I would appreciate it.
I can say that the arts are supported in a variety of ways, but mainly in the philanthropic community. There's a concerted effort and some very wealthy individuals that kind of spearhead things, And then I think from a corporate standpoint, we realize that investment in that makes the community stronger. So we do end up keeping those good people here. New people want to come here. And so there's a concerted investment from the private sector that will keep the arts here and grow it.
Yeah, and I would say that the people who run the organizations, there's been a lot of new leadership among some of these organizations over the last 10 years, and we've attracted some really strong people to lead things like the symphony and the performing arts and the Jocelyn and the various museums. Even the United Way has new leadership. There's been a big turnover recently, and we've done a good job of recruiting folks who are strong leaders. I think from ConAgra's standpoint, one of the challenges I had was when I was given the opportunity to run our foundation, I was told to kind of look at it through the lens of fewer, bigger, better. Our CEO felt like we'd gotten a little bit too spread out, that we didn't have a good core cause where we could really make a big difference. So at that point in time, we decided to, because we're a food company, we decided where we can really make the biggest difference is in the area of hunger. And what that meant was that some of the funding that we provided in the community wasn't going to be, it had been outside of the hunger space. So I had to look at some of the arts we were supporting and say, you know, gee, we're probably not going to be able to support you long term. I'm going to give you sort of an exit grant. But one thing I want to say to you is if you can figure out a way to leverage the money we give that has to do with our hunger cause, we'll continue to consider you. And it was interesting what happened. There's a very good children's theater here in town, for example. They came to us and said, you know, we've got an idea. We'd like to write, develop, produce a play teaching kids about food pyramid. And nutrition, education, and hunger were kind of our two core causes. We'd like to take that into schools if you would fund it. And that resulted in this play that goes into about 60 schools here locally. It's gone into a children's theater in Washington, D.C. We've taken it to Chicago as well, and provides a tool for the kids that we think is very important and reflects our cause, but also now allows us to support an arts organization here that we may not have supported because of our focus on hunger. Likewise, for the symphony and the performing arts, we talked to them and they said, you know what, we would like to get engaged in this effort that you have during the holidays called Shine the Light on Hunger. So if you will sponsor us, we'll incorporate a food drive and an initiative to give back to the food bank if you'll be our season sponsor during the holidays. So what you found is an organization and a community there that's really thinking creatively about how to meet its own needs, but also meet the needs of its funders.
Alan, I would add that you know, the arts is probably not, you know, our philanthropic focus is probably more youth services, social services for youth, but we do a lot of funding for the arts because it's just part of making this, you know, a top-tier city and a great place to live and to attract employees. We have seen a change in art funding. Years and years ago, corporations were really leading the pack in terms of funding the arts here. Perhaps due to some of the fortunes that are made here, there's much more individual Mr. and Mrs. money, if you will, in the arts, which is a really good, positive development for our arts because they have a broader base of funding here. But I believe that for the size of the town, I think we have excellent art scene here.
And from a recruiting standpoint, I was going to say that a lot of the comments that we get from young professionals who we're recruiting is that they are impressed with the art scene. Something I found really interesting as a comment is that we also have a great underground music scene here in Omaha, which it is important to young recruits and makes Omaha a much better place.
Good. Thank you all very much for participating.
I want to thank everybody for your questions this morning. SteinGroup and Commerce Lexington are most appreciative of your time. This has been extraordinarily elucidating and illuminating for us, and you know, there are lots more questions we could ask, so when we come back in a few years, we'll ask those questions too. But again, thank you all so very much for your participation in kicking off this morning's program.